by COMESA and the World Bank under its ASCENT program. The ASCENT program was launched last year to accelerate sustainable and clean energy access for 100 million people in up to 20 countries across Eastern and Southern Africa over the next 7 years. My name is Abhishek Bhaskar, and I work as a senior climate finance specialist at the World Bank, where I support the integration of carbon and climate finance solutions in priority operations with the goal of mobilizing private finance. I'll also be your host for today. A key aspect of the ASCENT program is to mobilize finance by monetizing emission reductions that are generated from underlying projects through the carbon markets. And that is what we will be zooming in on today. The first part of this webinar will focus on strategic perspectives on energy access and role of carbon finance, where we'll hear from leaders from World Bank, COMESA, and the private sector. While the second part will focus on operational aspects, looking closely at some of the core concepts and key considerations in monetizing carbon assets, where we'll hear from team members who are working directly in these areas. We have received strong interest in learning more about this topic from our country counterparts, many of whom have joined today. And these counterparts, they come from a broad range of background with different levels of familiarity with the carbon markets and the underlying issues. So what we have done is we have tried to cater to that diversity, and we hope that you'll be able to find at least parts of the presentation relevant to what you're doing in this area. Also, this webinar is the first of the many to come and part of a country engagement strategy that will deliver similar capacity building tools related to carbon markets in the coming days. For example, next month, we'll be hosting an in-person ASCENT Carbon Day for over 40 climate and digital focal points from 20 or so countries under the ASCENT program. There, we'll dive deeper into many of the areas that we cover today. So with that brief background, let us get started. Please feel free to use the chat for any questions, comments, or suggestions as we move along. To kick off today's proceedings, I'd like to invite Wendy Hughes. Wendy is World Bank's Regional Director for Infrastructure for Eastern and Southern Africa, and she brings over 2 decades of experience working in energy and climate change. She's responsible for policy, partnerships, and delivery of infrastructure programs in 25 countries in the region. Wendy, over to you.
Thanks very much, Abhishek. It's really great to have the opportunity to join the kickoff workshop of this series. I am really delighted to welcome everybody to this webinar on the potential role of carbon markets to support energy access. And I'm really glad to see also this very broad interest from participants from, I think, more than 20 countries. I haven't been able to count who's actually logged in, but in terms of the positive responses, we were expecting a very wide turnout. So it's really exciting to see that this is a topic that people are interested in. I don't need to tell anybody on this call, but just to remind us all, access to electricity is absolutely essential to support human development, to reduce income and gender inequality, and to promote inclusion and create new economic opportunities. And the very disturbing and sad fact is that as of today, only about 48% of the population in East and Southern Africa, and something like on average 26% in rural areas, and in some countries it's as low as 2% in rural areas. Only that proportion of the population have access to electricity today. It's just unconscionable. Rapidly increasing access to electricity access in Africa is a key priority for the World Bank Group. Some of you may know that at the spring meetings, our spring meetings in April, our president and the president of African Development Bank made a joint announcement that together we will work to ensure that an additional 300 million people have access to electricity by 2030. And to do that, we are engaging very closely with our partner governments, with Sustainable Energy for All, with Rockefeller Foundation, and with a number of other development partners, as well as through our IFC, our private sector arm with private sector. So this is something that we are working on very hard. And within that space and toward achievement of that objective, in the Africa's eastern and in southern and eastern Africa, our flagship program to support this goal is called ASCENT, Accelerating Sustainable and Clean Energy Access Transformation. It covers 21 countries and will establish a platform for an ambitious leap toward universal energy access, together with a clean energy transition in this part of Africa. ASCENT is designed to provide access to 100 million people, so that's a big portion of the 300 million target. And this will be achieved by leveraging $5 billion of World Bank funding to attract another $10 billion in co-financing from public and private sector. We see that carbon finance can play a major role in enhancing the financial viability of energy access projects. And also providing electricity to low-income, particularly rural and vulnerable people, creates low-income economic growth. It also helps families and businesses deal with the natural disasters like droughts and other crises. So it is very much a part of enhancing household and community resilience as well. Carbon finance for energy access could offer carbon market players a really unique opportunity, not only to support greenhouse gas emission reduction, but also to improve lives and make a very significant development impact. ASCENT is taking a forward-looking approach toward carbon markets, and for this we are extremely grateful to be working closely with COMESA, our key regional partner. The program working with and through COMESA will establish a region-wide platform for programmatic aggregation of carbon assets using digital tools. And I'm really stressing the aggregation and the digital. These are very key parts of the thinking and the program design. The aggregation is designed to really help level the playing field, to enable all projects, however small, in terms of number of carbon credits, to be able to access carbon markets. It will also allow buyers to easily diversify their portfolios and also to easily grow their portfolios. And modernizing the carbon markets process through digitization, we also see as a very transformational aspect. This will mean adding significantly to the integrity of the assets, and that means adding to the value of the assets. Also reducing the costs of the whole monitoring, reporting, and verification system once it is established, and reducing the time between creation of an electricity connection and the flow of carbon revenues. So today, I think you will hear more about carbon markets and specifically the ASCENT program's approach to helping countries generate carbon credits from energy access projects and monetizing them. This, as Abhishek said in the beginning, is the first event in a series. So I invite you today to engage, to learn, and to ask questions, and to help set the direction for the future sessions of this series. We appreciate that people who've joined this call are bringing knowledge and experience, and we are very much looking forward to the active contributions to all of you to really help shape this endeavor, which we believe can really make a reset in Africa's ability to really tap into carbon markets and to bring that source of revenue to really bolster and accelerate access to electricity in Africa, which is absolutely sorely needed and a huge priority for not just the World Bank, but for African governments and absolutely for people living in Africa. So with that, I'm really, really happy to be able to participate in this first session. Thank you for inviting me, and I pass it back to Abby. Thanks.
Thank you, Wendy, and thanks for offering that high-level view and the role that carbon finance can play in meeting some of those access goals in the region. Following Wendy, I'd like to invite Hania Dawood, who is the Manager for Climate Finance and Economics at the World Bank. Hania leads various strategic initiatives focused on advancing climate finance, carbon markets, and climate analytics globally. She has also led efforts to scale investments in green cities, sustainable buildings, innovative climate technologies, and carbon markets in previous role at IFC, the World Bank's private sector arm. Hania, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Abi. Thank you, Wendy. Good morning, good afternoon, friends and colleagues. Terrific to see so many attendees from across the ASCENT program client countries. As Wendy mentioned, we have with us today representatives from over 20 countries coming from different departments and ministries. And truly, all of you here are our essential counterparts to successfully deliver on this strategic and impactful program for the sub-Saharan continent. So for us here at the bank, we've had a large team, and I know as well at COMESA and in the ASCENT countries that have been hard at work over the past couple of months to prepare and design the ASCENT operation. And our carbon markets and finance team has identified that beyond the huge development impact potential of the program, of course, promoting access to energy for 100 million people in sub-Saharan Africa, the ASCENT operation has significant potential to show that carbon markets can provide projects with an additional stream of cash flows that are tied to emission reductions. And this, of course, can help make projects more viable, can reduce financing costs, and importantly, can bring benefits to communities through equitable benefits sharing plans. So we really think that the ASCENT program presents a fantastic opportunity to showcase that carbon markets can channel climate finance to developing countries and for impactful climate projects. And this is why this series of capacity building efforts, which, as Abi mentioned, kicks off today with this webinar, followed by, in a couple of weeks, the ASCENT Carbon Day in Berlin, and other events throughout the year are really critical. And the goal here is to enable us all to have a common understanding about the state of play of carbon markets and where the opportunity lies, what are the challenges and risks in this fast evolving space, and importantly, what it's going to take as far as institutional and policy frameworks to unlock carbon from this important operation. And in our experience at the bank, these types of fora where we bring together client countries and other partners to co-develop solutions and share lessons learned have been critical to advance the carbon markets and carbon pricing agenda. Just a few examples this year, we had workshops in Kigali, in Cartagena, Colombia, Senegal, and Guinea, where we facilitated these types of sharing experiences between countries on topics such as domestic regulations and carbon markets, carbon infrastructure requirements, challenges within interministerial coordination, pricing strategies, etc. And our goal is to support all the ASCENT countries through similar country and regional technical workshops on various aspects of energy access, of course, and carbon markets and finance. And last but not least, it's an exciting time for carbon markets with active efforts globally to make progress on Article 6 and also to address end-to-end integrity and infrastructure bottlenecks, as well as demand use case aspects for the voluntary carbon markets. And for us here at the bank, at the highest leadership level, from our president and our senior managing director, we're committed to working with stakeholders to push on these bottlenecks, leveraging the many years of experience that the bank has had on carbon markets since the CDM days, and our renewed commitment, which we announced last year during COP 28. Of course, it won't be easy, but all of you here in the room can really play a critical role in showing, through making the ASCENT program a success, that the potential that we all think carbon markets have can truly be realized. So let me welcome you once again, and looking forward to our continued engagement moving forward, and to hopefully seeing many of you in Berlin in a couple of weeks. Back to you, Abi.
Many thanks, Hania, and thanks for setting that context for the carbon part, and especially highlighting the focus on co-developing solutions with partners today and moving forward. As we know, COMESA will be a key partner in implementing the ASCENT program on the ground. We have with us Ambassador Mohammed Mansoor Mohammed Kada, who is the Assistant Secretary General for Programs at COMESA, to share its experiences in the region. Dr. Gadde has had a rich 25-year diplomatic career with the Egyptian Foreign Service, including as Deputy Assistant Foreign Minister for African Organizations, Ambassador of Egypt in South Sudan, Deputy Chief of Mission in Berlin, among others. Can I invite Dr. Gadde to please offer his remarks? COMESA colleagues, let us know if you're having trouble connecting, or perhaps there is a technical glitch. I hope you are all able to hear me well, and it's not on my end. Thanks, Navi. In the interest of time, why don't we move forward and move on to the next speaker? I would like to introduce Naveed Tariq, who is the CEO of Seagrass, where he focuses on building government's capacity around carbon governance, sourcing high-quality carbon credits, and helping direct capital to impactful climate projects. Seagrass operates as a wholly owned subsidiary of E.ON, one of Europe's largest operators of I'm sorry, I'm getting a message from the ministry. One of Europe's largest operators of energy networks and infrastructure, providing innovative solutions for over 45 million customers. Now, Wade, can I invite you to come in, and perhaps the ambassador could follow you?
Yeah, I'm happy to wait if the ambassador is ready, Abhishek, and otherwise, yeah, let me know.
Yeah, I thought someone from his office tried to chime in. Malama, did you want to come in? Is he connected?
Please. Yes, please. Dr. Gadde says he's not able to speak because he's disabled. So I don't know, maybe Joshua, if you're able to help him.
Is it okay if we move forward with Naveed and he can come in after Naveed?
I'm not sure. Maybe because I don't know. Maybe the schedule, if he's able to stay on until the end. Yeah.
So perhaps we give him a minute, and Joshua, our colleagues, could let us know if there are any glitches before we move forward. Apologies, everyone. Dr. Gadde is on the move. I think he's traveling, and so perhaps remote connectivity are playing a part here. So kindly bear with us. We'll resume in 45 seconds.
Ambassador, you could now just enable your mic. It's activated, and your video.
COMESA colleagues, any update? I see he's looking to join.
Just 1 second. He had dropped off. He's joining again.
Ambassador, please. I see that your microphone is on mute. We can see you. Joshua, if you could help the ambassador unmute his microphone. Thank you, Ambassador. Thanks a lot. So while the technical glitches are being resolved, Naveed, if I could invite you once again, and apologies for the confusion, but please carry on.
No problem. So yeah, hi everybody. My name is Naveed. I'm not going to introduce myself in the interest of time. Abhishek already explained it. Just the CEO of Seagrass, helping clients, may it be the public sector or the private sector, with on the carbon infrastructure and carbon pricing and also carbon sourcing side. So before I start my presentation, I just wanted to explain why I'm here and what I would like to achieve with the few minutes that I have. So if you think about the ASCENT program as a fund that will invest into different infrastructure or renewable electrification infrastructure using the carbon market, then usually the outcome would be, of course, infrastructure that will produce electricity and provide electricity to all the people in the industry. But also it will help reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, and in return of those emission reduction, carbon credits will be generated. And that's where the second part of the journey starts. Once the carbon credits are generated, they need to be sold in the market. So that we need to make sure and what are that they are of good quality, they have a good price, they have coming from the right regulatory framework, and that they have a high integrity, because there are buyers which are going to be sitting outside your countries, maybe the government sector buyers or also non-government actors who would like to buy those credits. They will look at certain things before they will buy those credits. So if there is a lot of investment going in, there's a big amount of inventory of carbon credits are getting generated, but on the other side, those inventory of carbon credits are not getting sold in the market because we didn't do certain things right in the beginning. Then we will have a problem. The money will likely, it will be the policy of the World Bank and everybody else, but it will be difficult to then attract private sector money if at the end of the day, the carbon credits that are generated cannot be taken to the market. So today I'm going to discuss a little bit about what is the market perspective when the countries are trying to get themselves ready to create carbon credit or create their economies around carbon by using the carbon credits. So let me share my screen, and then we can see my presentation. So yeah, I think everybody can see my presentation. And so that's the market perspective that we would like to share, that how you can leverage the carbon markets for the energy, sustainability, and also to create green economy. So if we look at the NDCs in the East and Southern Africa at the moment, there is a commitment by, I've taken only the 12 countries here, around 770 million tons that we should reduce by business as usual, from the business as usual baseline, using the indicative and the conditional or NDCs that have been put into place by in the documents. Now that would require financial assistance, technology transfer, capacity building from the developed countries and also from the international organizations. But before we jump into like what we need to do and how to create the investor confidence, let's look at some of the research that is showing what really works in terms of attracting that finances into the country and then creating a good carbon full transaction life cycle. So there's a research, and there's a link in the presentation as well, and happy to share this presentation later on, that shows that there was a research done which shows that around 1,500 policies were implemented in the last 2 decades in 41 countries over the 6 continents, and that can be evaluated, and that shows that out of those 1,500 policies and measures, 69 measures were the best one that actually end up reducing the carbon footprint or the greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm just using 2 examples over here of 2 countries just to show how the analysis showed that once the policies were implemented, then from the business as usual, which is the red line, to the graph that is showing the lines below, the blue and the black line, that shows that it immediately starts to show the effect. So that means the carbon credits are now getting generated, and those carbon credits are now have high integrity. You can measure the carbon effect, that yes, they are fully backed by the science and data that's showing that the carbon effect has taken place, and now you can sell those carbon credits in the market. So we need to make sure that what are those policies, and then how to then go about implementing them. So when it comes to looking at the region that we are sitting at the moment, and looking at the policies that have worked, we believe that there are 3 areas where if the interventions are done, or the policies are done, or some kind of a regulatory and investment is done, we will see a good amount of not only a main promise of the carbon market, which is to reduce the carbon emission, but also production of good quality, high integrity carbon credits can come out of it. And the 3 areas that these policies have been repeatedly showing in the transport sector, in the electricity sector, the building and the industry sector, is around renewable expansion and the clean cooking, low carbon taxes, local carbon taxes, so that you can also take care of now the border taxes that are coming around, and having local emission registries and trading legal framework. So we believe if you look at all of these policies and measures that actually work, and then change them or transform them and customize them considering for your Eastern and Southern African nations needs, then these are the 3 areas, if money and capacity is built, that means that we will have a great outcome. Now let's look at from the private sector why it is important that these things are built. Those 3 things that I just mentioned: having a local registry, having a local carbon tax, and having a local renewable electrified grid infrastructure. There are a couple of factors that is really important for companies, organizations to invest money, not only in buying those carbon credits, but also the vision that the World Bank has, that not only have the 5 billion to go into these countries, but also raise additional 10 billion so that we can co-finance these things into these countries. That means there are certain things that are important that we need to think about. I'm going to go very quickly. There's 9 of them are listed over here, but just let's see how the time allows, and then we can go through them. So first of all, mitigation of investment risks. Once we have stable policies in place, that means it starts to give me confidence that the money that will be invested, I can see the whole pathway all the way to the carbon production, and then my investment can be monetized. Access to the emerging market. Now, this solar, hydro, wind, these are good resources or the good investments from the money perspective. And we want to invest into something like this. Hence, having these opportunities in the emerging market is something that investors are looking for. When it comes to the viability of the projects, may it be political risk, may it be other delivery risk, may it be availability, the resource risks. When you have these blended finance structures where World Bank is there or MICA is there, and there are some guarantees are given, all of a sudden it reduces the cost for the investors for their interest rates. And the moment my interest rate requirement for any investment in these nations goes down, projects become viable for me to then invest. Same thing is with the returns, maximizing returns through scale, means that once we have local registries and they start to connect with each other, now any carbon credits that are produced in your country can be sold in multiple exchanges, in multiple marketplaces, in multiple jurisdictions and markets. And that creates economies, that creates access to different markets, but also having local pools create some kind of economies of scale for us to then create larger transactions. Then we have blended finance structures, which is great. That is what ASCENT is offering at the moment to the private sector, and we will be definitely looking into it. How can we use blended finance structures and some concessions, local concessions from the government to create kind of a benefit sharing agreement with the government, and then install projects that create immediate electrification, but also create, once the carbon are sold, there is a benefit sharing agreement existing with the government. Institutional capacity and the local resource capacity. This is very important also from when we look into from the investor perspective. Institutional capacity gives me the confidence that there is going to be right amount of governance that will be available from the government sector to make sure the projects are executed, there is a proper oversight available, and then it reduces my risks of running into legal issues because it wasn't there before. And having also cost-wise, the more and more local capacity, local trainings and local education starts to come in and the local expertise starts to grow, it also then helps me to reduce my cost because I do not have to fly in people, but actually work with the people for the projects around their communities and then create structures which are more relevant to the market that I'm operating in. And the last but not the least, anything around transparency, anti-corruption helps us from the governance point of view, and that's where it's very important to work with the local governments in establishing clear contracts and clear benefit sharing agreements so that all the projects are fully and transparently registered and then traded later on. But just looking at the readiness level, if this is what good looks like, and this is what wish list of the investors could look like, then let's look at the readiness level at the moment. And you can see from this very busy slide deck, what it is showing is that the whole of Africa, we still have a massive gap when it comes to the readiness level from the regulations perspective. Of course, there are some great initiatives going on, and it could increase as we speak. And from the readiness level of the renewable expansions and the grids availability, it's also very little at the moment. There are certain projects that we are working and collaborating with the World Bank as well to see how we can unlock the carbon financing for the grid infrastructure. And as you can see right now, it's a very little amount of money that goes to the grids. And as long as the grids are not there, you cannot connect the renewable capacity to different cities. And just to give you a perspective, my parent company, E.ON, we operate transmission lines around 148,000 kilometers in 8 countries, serving a population of 263 million. Compared to that, 113,000 kilometers is the total length of the transmission in whole of sub-Saharan Africa, which is 38 countries, and they're serving 1.2 billion people. So this disparity is completely mind-boggling, and that is exactly the point that we're trying to make, that the grids, investment in the grids, investment in the electrification, not only the renewable generation is needed, but also able to evacuate that power from place A to place B. This is how very important as well. And yes, there is a lot of work to be done. And this is, I was asked to simply not just leave it there by saying, yeah, this is what should be done. This is what is needed. And this would be nice to have, but also come up with what kind of a solution and what is there to offer. So what we believe that within the 1 to 2 years, the countries can build really good frameworks, can also have implementation and execution bodies in place, and also then create these central repositories and registration structures. There are resources available, there are donors and multilaterals, there are capacity building organizations available, and investors who would love to get involved into these kind of things. But at the end of the day, ambition has to be there, and then I think where there is a will, yeah, the everything else will follow. So yeah, reach out to us, and happy to discuss and take any questions at the end of the call as well. Thank you. Back to Abhishek.
Thanks a lot, Naveed. It's always very helpful and insightful to hear directly from real market players, actors, and see what some of these key considerations are, especially as you're building up in a country on some of these things. So really appreciate your time. Uh, I hope we now have Ambassador Gadde with us. COMESA colleagues, could you confirm if he is able to connect? Malama, Daniel? Let us know if it's okay to move forward with the agenda in the interest of time.
Sorry, Abi,
Please.
we had the power cut, so we dropped off the call.
I see.
So
yeah, please go on, Malama.
No, I'm just Joshua. I think Joshua, you have to guide us here since you are the one, with information on the IT side.
Okay, let's just proceed as we try to bring the SG on board. You can just proceed with the program.
All right. Thank you, Joshua. Malama, I hope it's okay to proceed.
Yes, that's okay.
All right. Thank you, COMESA colleagues, for trying to connect, and the ambassador. Now, moving from strategic high-level perspectives that we heard from colleagues at the bank, Naveed from Seagrass and private sector, let's move and steer a bit into the operationalization of carbon finance activities on the ground. And to do that, to provide that steer, I would invite Hari Gadde to share with us some of the basic concepts, terminologies, and key considerations related to carbon markets. Hari works as Senior Climate Change Specialist at the World Bank. He leads the technical work of the Partnership for Market Implementation Facility and has been working on climate change related issues, including carbon markets, carbon pricing, for more than 15 years. Hari, over to you.
Thank you so much, Abi. Can you see my slides?
Yes, and we can hear you well. You're good to go.
Yeah, thank you so much again. Good morning and good afternoon, colleagues. So, as Abi mentioned in my presentation, so what I tried to do is to introduce you some basics of the carbon markets. What are the types of carbon markets? Who are the main players in this space? And what are the challenges that the carbon markets face at the moment? And then my colleague Gemma will talk about the infrastructure requirements for the carbon markets. So I think the context is well set already by Wendy, Hania, and even Naveed, of course, in his slides. Talked about some of the opportunities and, of course, also the ambition, of course, of the financing that is needed for African countries. So all African countries, I'm sure we are all aware that under the Paris Agreement submitted their what we call it as nationally determined contributions, NDCs. That is basically a blueprint of countries' ambition to achieve climate targets. of course, that is within their capacity, and of course with conditionality in many cases for achieving those targets upon receiving the external financing. So all African countries together requires almost like $3 trillion to meet their NDCs. To put that into a context, the GDP of all African countries combined is slightly over 3 trillion last year. So that means, like, in order to meet their NDCs without having any additional external support, so African countries needs allocate 10% of that GDP. I mean, it's like, which is enormous, of course, compared to, for example, the African countries spend around 5% of their GDP on healthcare, for example. So that, of course, means African countries need to utilize all sorts of financing that exist and all opportunities that markets could provide, and that's basically where the carbon markets come into picture. I mean, Africa has been part of the carbon markets over a decade now, but unfortunately, the amount of the opportunity that Africa utilized is less than 2%, so far. So that, of course, like means, like, the challenge with building the capacity at the individual country level across the board. I mean, like, at the government level, at the private sector level, because majority of the projects in Africa are being implemented by small and medium enterprises. So that means the capacity that these players require in order to potentially participate and then make use of this is enormous. I mean, it's like, almost every African country in their NDCs talks about the role of the carbon markets. Of course, though with varying degrees of sophistication, the details. Now the NDCs 3.0, which is what, of course, the next round of NDCs that majority of the countries are working right now, provides an additional opportunity for countries to update their figures and then to clarify much better the role of carbon finance or carbon markets provider. So how can carbon finance help? Again, Wendy, Hania, and we talked about that thing. So one of the major plus points of the carbon markets is, it doesn't create debt to any countries that participate. So the more that you utilize, the better it will be for the benefit of the communities and the country as a whole. And then, of course, it will allow diversification of revenue sources. I mean, like, we have n number of examples to show how carbon revenues can be leveraged, to increase the financial flows to the projects from other financing sources, and then how it could help, of course, to bring more investors into the country, how it could increase the viability of the projects, and so on and so forth. So the benefits are, of course, enormous, but at the same time, of course, also, as I mentioned, the challenges also equally huge. Because out of the 3 trillion that I mentioned, of course, like, 12% of the climate finance so far flows to the African countries. So the carbon markets provide a huge opportunity, like the African Carbon Markets Initiative, which is, of course, exclusively focusing on helping African countries to increase their access to carbon markets, estimates that African countries could mobilize up to $100 billion from energy access projects and then others in these countries. Of course, this just to show how countries are getting ready to access these carbon markets, and based on our past experience, mostly from the clean development mechanism under the Kyoto Protocol, which, of course, almost all African countries are part of, and wherein established the what we call it as the designated national authorities, DNE. So they are basically the focal points to United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, and of course they are also the authority to govern the carbon markets domestically. So one of the requirements of under the Paris Agreement, in order for any country to participate in these markets, is to establish the so-called DNAs. And now, of course, many, so far, of course, 87 countries have submitted their nationally designated authorities. There are several in African countries also established, and then many more are in the process of establishing such. This again, I think Naveed also mentioned briefly about this one. I mean, it's like, the one of the challenges under the Paris Agreement, mainly because every country is now responsible for meeting their NDCs. So they need to ensure that they identify the opportunities, and then when they sell these carbon credits to outside, they need to ensure that they have sufficient emission reductions domestically to meet their NDCs. So one way to regulate all those aspects is through introducing some kind of a domestic carbon market regulation. So there are many countries right now, or in either already established such kind of a domestic regulation, or in the process. For example, in Africa, we have 7 countries already have some form of a domestic regulation in place. Now, just to summarize, 1 minute, to what are the key challenges. Of course, Naveed also talked a little bit about that. In the carbon market space, in order for us to maintain the equilibrium between supply and the demand side. When I talk about supply, that means like how we generate these carbon credits. That means like identification of right projects, ensuring that those projects generate carbon credits of high quality. Of course, there are different attributes that confirm the quality of these credits, which we are not going today. But of course, like we need to ensure that all the credits are of high quality, and of course, then the country has a full ownership on clarity on the ownership of those credits, who owns those credits. And then the demand side, of course, we need to also have a clarity on like who the buyers in the market are, what purpose actually these buyers are purchasing these credits, and of course like at what price the buyers are willing to purchase these credits, and so on and so forth. So only when there is a balance between these two, there will be sufficient liquidity in the market, and then supports the revenues from the carbon. Having said that one, of course, there are many challenges right now facing, for example, challenges to the private sector. They need to ensure that they are not using these these carbon credits for greenwashing purpose, and then of course they need to have a high clarity on the quality of the credits that they are buying, and then so on and so forth. I think again in the initial interventions, Hania, for example, talked about there are different initiatives already ongoing in the market to bring that trust and then transparency to carbon markets. And then, of course, as I already mentioned, I mean, it's like the capacity of the countries, and then their ability to introduce these domestic regulations, and then, of course, the arrangements to approve the projects, and then, of course, establishing a institutional structures, and all those things, of course, are one of the major challenges that the market is facing right now. Why is it right time now? I mean, it's like as I mentioned, the financing needs are enormous, but of course, like from the past experience under the clean development mechanism, we know for sure the benefits that these carbon markets could bring in. For example, under the Kyoto Protocol, the clean development mechanism, it generated over $300 billion investments, and there is a leverage ratio of like 4.6. Like so for every dollar invested in these emission reduction projects, led to, of course, $4.6 further investments. So voluntary markets, of course, like they quadrupled in size recently. They are now $2 billion. Of course, compared to the financing needs, they're smaller, but of course there are various estimates now suggest that these markets could go to multiples of billions of dollars, like up to $50 billion in the next few years. And then, of course, the Paris Agreement provides again opportunity to introduce the carbon markets under Article 6, which we talk about in a bit. So that, of course, also has potential to save over $300 billion per year by 2030 if countries participate in such markets. And of course, now we have a huge technological advancements in terms of how we track these projects, how we account the emission reductions from these projects. We are all familiar, cook stove projects. They all dispersed and then they reside in remote places. So for someone to go to those places to verify that that cook stove project is working properly and it is reducing emissions, so it adds up a lot of transaction costs. So now with the digital technologies, those things got much easier and relative to the, of course, the past experiences. Of course, now Africa Carbon Markets Initiative which is another great initiative focusing on African countries, and they are supporting many countries to of course develop the prospectus of eligible carbon market projects, and then facilitate the dialogue between the countries and potential buyers in the market. So that's, of course, also promises to support African countries. And of course, in addition to, of course, carbon markets, I'm sure you also heard about results-based climate finance, which of course is also integral part of our ASCENT program, and which we talk about results-based finance in the next slide. So let's start with some terminology. It's not too complicated, but I think you are all familiar with this, the so-called carbon credit. So someone calls carbon credits, some calls emission reduction credits. But the bottom line is all of these represent 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide from these projects. So how you calculate these emission reductions? So not again go into the technicalities of that, but I think so we need to know, okay, take for example cook stove. It's like, okay, you install an efficient cook stove. Now one needs to estimate what would have been the emissions in absence of this efficient cook stove by burning the firewood in 3-stone cook stove. Like what are the emissions in the baseline scenario, and then what are the emissions now with this improved or energy efficient cook stove? So that the difference between these two are called, of course, the emission reductions. Of course, there are methodologies that govern, of course, how these emission reductions needs to be calculated. But in a simplistic terms, of course, that is basically what is known as emission reduction credits. The results-based climate finance is again one more term that, of course, you often hear. Here, one of the differences is that, of course, as the name suggests, the payment will be made upon achievement of the results. The results could be in different forms. It's like in this context, in the carbon markets context, of course, we talk about the results are tons of CO2 reduced. So if you reduce these many tons, then of course, then upon which the payments will be made. So one of the attractive features of these results-based financing is that any against the payments that are made when a project reduces certain emission reductions, those credits will remain in the country. So that means, like in a normal scenario in the carbon markets, look, when you transact that one, so you need to transfer these emission reductions to the buyer party. So that means, like, the countries cannot utilize them for their accounting purpose. And now that you have, every country has NDCs, you need to have many emission reductions to meet that thing. So if the payments are made against results-based financing, so that means, like, of course, you get the payments, plus you will be able to retain those credits domestically so that you can use them for your NDC purpose. So that's a kind of a double whammy, in case of results-based finance. And then, of course, when it comes to Article 6, which is, of course, the article that facilitates the creation of carbon markets under the Paris Agreement. like similar to what we have under the Kyoto Protocol that facilitated the creation of clean development mechanism. Now, Paris Agreement provides through Article 6 this framework to establish such kind of markets. So if you are, of course, talking about Article 6, you also hear a lot about a couple of terminology, which is internationally transferred mitigation outcome, ITMO. I mean, just to put in the simplistic word, ITMO, and then corresponding adjustment. So these are the two terms you keep on hearing from countries and from your DNAs and from buyers and etc. So Article 6 allows transfer of these credits to other countries so that other country can use these credits for meeting their NDCs. So when such transfer happens, so those emission reduction credits are called ITMOs. If they are used for NDC purpose, or if they use for the CORSIA, which is the similar scheme for airlines. They have their own targets set under this particular scheme under the administration of the United Nations body. And then, of course, these are all colorful compliance markets in a way, because they are all, of course, like regulated by a certain body and etc. So when these credits are used for such kind of applications, then those credits are called ITMOs. So in order for some country use these credits for their NDCs, the selling country needs to authorize them. I mean, it's like you need to prove or agree to that, commit to that. Okay, I am willing to transfer these credits to another country so that they can use to meet their NDCs. By doing so, you are committing to not using the same credits for meeting your own NDC. So this accounting mechanism is called corresponding adjustments. This is the new mechanism that is devised by parties under the Paris Agreement to ensure that there is no double counting of these emission reductions. So just to be in simple terms, so this is how actually the mechanism works. So just remember ITMO when it is used for other countries' NDC or other compliance mechanisms like CORSIA. And then by doing this, one countries are committing not to double count, so that is called corresponding adjustment. So we will talk in subsequent webinars, like then the details of like how countries will do, what are the challenges, and then opportunities, what are the things that countries needs to consider, etc., etc. And then, of course, next is the voluntary carbon market. We all know voluntary carbon markets are driven by mostly the corporate sector, because many of the corporates set their own net zero or some kind of the climate targets internally to meet, and of course then they utilize these carbon credits to offset some of those emission reductions. So that's of course like basic level. I mean, so I'm not going to go, but I think the the credits, of course, go through a certain cycle. Again, we will go in detail in subsequent webinars, like on the life cycle of these carbon credits and etc. But we need to know that the credits are generated of high quality, and then there is a sufficient government role and then governance of these things. We need to ensure that the carbon revenues that the country receives are properly utilized and to the benefit of communities or whoever actually impacted by the project. And then, of course, you also need to know what these credits are used for. I mean, like this is a basic level that one needs to understand. So I'm again, so I'm not going to go in detail, but of course, in Article 6, there are two again sub articles that facilitates the development of these carbon markets. Article 6.2 and Article 6.4. So 6.2, under Article 6.2, the transactions happen between country to country. No private sector or no individuals involved in this one. All the agreements and then and commitments happen between two countries, like for example Rwanda entering in agreement with Switzerland, Senegal entering into Norway, Ghana entering into South Korea. So those are the kind of agreements that happen under Article 6.2. So in this scenario is where, of course, like the countries, because there are countries are involved, so these credits are mostly used for meeting the NDCs of the buyer country. So then that's basically where these ITMOs and corresponding adjustment all will become much more critical. For the 6.4 is, I would say, again, for simple stick purpose, it's an improved version of the clean development mechanism. Learning from the past mistakes, now parties are negotiating the modalities and then rules around how this Article 6.4 needs to be administered, governed, and operationalized. The rules are not yet finalized, and then we're hoping that the Baku COP this year will bring some closure to discussion, so that there will be a carbon markets activities even under 6.4 moving forward. So that's on that one, and this chart shows actually how many of such agreements already in place under Article 6.2, and you can see there are around 7 African countries entered into multiple agreements with the buyer countries, and of course this is one of the potential sources of revenue from carbon markets for many countries. And just to give this one, of course, these are the players in the voluntary carbon market space, where, of course, like the private sector corporates buy the credits from that one. And then we talked about why these corporates buy these carbon credits, because they have either a net zero target, or they have a carbon neutral target, or they have a carbon negative target. I mean, just in terms again to the difference between net zero and then carbon neutral. So net zero, if a company has a net zero target, that means they set their target towards meeting the 1.5 degree, the what the Paris Agreement says. So what are the emission reductions that company needs to achieve in order to align with those 1.5 degree target? Obviously, that is the much more challenging and very ambitious. Whereas carbon neutral, so it's up to the country to decide on what is their target could be, and they can set some level of the target, and then of course they see where the carbon credits could be used to meet those targets. And carbon negative is of course going well beyond these things, and then they become a negative, so that is much more ambitious than the carbon zero or net zero or carbon neutral. This gives a snapshot of main players across African voluntary carbon markets. I mean, like, it's not very legible. Hopefully, when we share the slides, you can see, of course, it says basically who are all buying carbon credits in Africa, and then who are the major countries that are in process of supplying the credits, and then who are other marketplace that facilitates these transactions, and then so on and so forth. So there is a lot happening in Africa at this under current framework compared to what we saw in the past under the clean development mechanism, and hence of course like capacity building, having domestic regulations, putting institutional structures in place is very critical. And then through ASCENT program we are aiming to facilitate such kind of capacity building, and then help all countries to navigate this the requirements to facilitate the carbon markets participation. This is my final slide. Of course, as I said in the beginning, there are many challenges that are in the markets, but there are also many initiatives ongoing to support this these global carbon markets. There are several players already acting, and then we are hopeful that the guidance and the initiatives that these players are providing should facilitate more demand, more trust, more transparency, and more liquidity in the markets, so that many African countries and then market players could benefit from. I'll stop here and maybe hand over back to Abi for next session or for Q&A. Thanks.
Thank you, Hari. I see that Gemma is ready. I also received a text from Ambassador's office that he may be connected. Ambassador, just wanted to check. What I would also offer for you to consider is if you are available to offer closing remarks, if that allows you sufficient time to connect and be ready. So if that's okay with you.
I'm already
Yeah.
connected, I think. I think you can hear me
Perfect.
now, right?
Yes.
So can I
yes,
go ahead
please come
now?
in. Yes, please come in.
Thank you. Well, best regards to previous speakers, all of them very helpful and very useful information. Thank you very much for putting this together. It's a great privilege to address this webinar on carbon markets, convened under the auspices of the project of Accelerating Sustainable and Clean Energy Transformation, ASCENT. Today, we gather to explore the transformative potential of carbon markets in addressing climate change and fostering sustainable development in our region. In fact, carbon markets in Africa are confronted with numerous challenges that impede their development and effectiveness. These challenges include the absence of robust regulatory frameworks and governance structures, resulting in uncertain markets for investors and participants. In addition, access to technical expertise and finance is often limited, rendering project development and monitoring difficult. Furthermore, African countries face difficulty with the high transaction costs and complex procedures associated with the related certification processes. Together, these factors lead to low participation in international carbon markets. At the same time, and despite some notable progress, our region still faces substantial challenges in providing energy to its citizens, with over 600 million people in sub-Saharan Africa lacking electricity. The lack of energy access further exacerbates climate change problems due to the reliance on unsustainable energy solutions by the energy poor. Dear participants, COMESA is deeply committed to advancing energy access and climate change adaptation and mitigation initiatives, recognizing that clean, affordable, and reliable energy is fundamental to social development, economic growth, and environmental sustainability. Our efforts in this field have been multifaceted, focusing on promoting renewable energy, enhancing energy efficiency, and supporting climate resilience. The ASCENT project, funded by the World Bank, is our flagship initiative on accelerating sustainable and clean energy access. Approved in 2023 with a financing envelope of $5 billion, ASCENT aims to accelerate sustainable and clean energy access for 100 million people across up to 20 countries in Eastern and Southern Africa. The ASCENT project has adopted a multi-pronged implementation strategy, which includes a regional component to be implemented by COMESA and the Trade and Development Bank, which is an affiliate institution of COMESA, as well as country-specific components in which the bank and qualifying countries sign direct agreements for implementation of specific projects. The COMESA Regional Platform, also referred as the Regional Energy Access Acceleration Platform, is a $50 million platform which aims to support the creation of an enabling environment for increasing access to sustainable and clean energy in the region. The platform focuses on creating an enabling environment through digitalization, upstream project development and policy advisory support, knowledge and skills promotion, and capacity building. The COMESA Regional Platform will support all ASCENT participating countries, both COMESA member states and non-COMESA member states, as well as those that are preparing for their project entry. More specifically, the COMESA Regional Platform will support the creation of a digital monitoring, reporting, and verification platforms for energy access and climate finance, This will improve sector planning, implementation of project activities, and monitoring, reporting, and verification of countries' energy access efforts. The platform will also support access to climate financing, including facilitating participation in carbon markets. The activities under this component will also include establishing a mechanism for carbon credits transactions. We therefore are very much enthusiastic about this project and look forward to working with you all to advance and achieve its objectives. As COMESA, we have been engaged in the climate change space for some years. Some of the interventions over the years include supporting COMESA member states to develop national climate change response strategies, climate policies, and recently to revise and update nationally determined contributions. Additionally, to mitigate the huge impact of climate change on agricultural productivity, COMESA has been piloting landscape-based approaches to adaptation through climate-smart agriculture. COMESA has also been very active in ensuring regional priorities are infused into the global climate agenda through the African group of negotiators, including gender and agriculture priorities as key components of the Paris Agreement. Recent scientific assessments conducted have shown that the world is not on track to achieve the Paris Agreement climate goal of keeping global temperature increase at a maximum of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Therefore, COMESA is supporting its member states to revise and develop more ambitious NDCs for submission to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change by February 2025. Additionally, all parties to the Paris Agreement are now required to transition from the biennial update reporting to the new architecture of biennial transparency reporting under the Enhanced Transparency Framework. COMESA is providing capacity building to its member states to enable them to meet the reporting requirements of Article 13 of the Paris Agreement. Enhanced climate action, especially through low-carbon interventions like the ASCENT project provides, are key to achieving sustainable development goals in the COMESA region. The global carbon market has witnessed a rapid expansion over the last few years, with its value soaring to more than $900 billion in 2023. This expansion has been fueled by rising carbon prices and increased participation in both compliance and voluntary markets. The European Union Emissions Trading System, which is the world's largest carbon market, has played a crucial role in supporting the growth of this market. While growth has been noted in other markets in North America, Latin America, and Asia, the African share remains negligible. Knowledge exchange and capacity building like this webinar provides allow for capacity building for policymakers and other stakeholders on the African continent, which is crucial to promote the participation of the continent in the global carbon markets. This webinar exemplifies the efforts we need to exert to achieve our goal of getting the continent an effective and influential role on the global carbon market. At country and organizational levels, capacity building helps market participants to accurately measure, report, and verify emission reduction, which is fundamental to maintaining integrity and attracting investments. It also enables local stakeholders, including governments, business, entrepreneurs, and communities, to comprehend the intricate procedures of carbon markets, resulting in more informed and better participation. Crucially, capacity building facilitates the development of the necessary market infrastructure at country level. As I'm closing, I'm very confident that this webinar will provide a solid platform for the Innovation for Climate event scheduled to be organized in Berlin, Germany on 10th to 13th September, and to other future activities on climate-related interventions. I therefore look forward to a successful webinar. Wish you all the best and look forward to meeting you in Berlin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your remarks, for offering those insights. And I'm sorry you had to face technical glitches, but I'm very glad that you could connect in the end.
Thank you.
Thanks again for your time.
Most welcome. Thank you.
Thanks. A critical piece of carbon markets, as we heard from different speakers, is the actual performance data of various activities that can potentially yield the carbon revenue. And it is really important to make sure that the data is accurate and transparent. That will help strengthen market integrity. And that is why digitalization of monitoring, reporting, and verification of this data becomes an important part of the process. So to talk about what that means in real terms, we had Gemma Vives, who leads the bank's climate warehouse activities on carbon market infrastructure, such as digital MRV systems, national carbon registries, as well as country onboarding support to the Climate Action Data Trust. Gemma, all yours.
Thank you very much, Abby. Good morning and good afternoon, colleagues. I'm going to screen share my presentation. And please let me know if you can see the full mode now. Can you see it, Abby?
Yes, all good, and hear you well.
Great. So colleagues, we're going to move now to the next section of this webinar, which will be focusing on carbon market infrastructure. This session will be focusing on the key terminologies, the key definitions and components that are included in carbon market infrastructure, and then also the underlying legal framework, as well as the governance. And finally, we will deep dive in very important components of this infrastructure, including the digital MRV system and also the registry system. So what is carbon market infrastructure? We define carbon market infrastructure as the systems and platforms that facilitate the operation and functioning of carbon markets, of course, through the support of underlying frameworks and institutions. So let me walk you through from left to right. You can see 4 boxes, and these are the 4 key components of infrastructure needed for participating in carbon markets. Firstly, we have the greenhouse gas inventories. Inventories are systems that help us to record greenhouse gas emissions and removals, typically organize the data by source, sector, or activity. Secondly, and very relevant for today's webinar and subsequent sessions, are the monitoring, reporting, and verification systems. These platforms help us aggregate large volumes of data, monitor real-time this performance data, as well as measure and finally report these emissions data to entities and international organizations. And we will talk more about this system later on in a couple of minutes. Thirdly, another important component of carbon market infrastructure are the registry systems, or we also call it carbon asset registries. These registries are fundamental to facilitate the issuance of the carbon asset. And once we have issued this asset, the registry system also helps us to do the tracking and the recording and the management of these assets. And in some instances, registries can also enable transaction functionalities, which is a great segue to finalize with the 4th component of the infrastructure, which is basically the trading platform. Trading platforms can be national banks, exchanges, meta registries, and other decentralized finance models that enable the settlement and the transaction of these assets. So all these 4 together can be interconnected in an end-to-end digital system to provide this full ecosystem, digital ecosystem for the functioning of carbon markets. It's really important to highlight on the right side of this slide that these systems need to be supported by the underlying legal and regulatory frameworks. As Ambassador was just saying, we need to have robust frameworks where national requirements are set, and also by the international requirements provided by the Paris Agreement on accounting and reporting of emission reductions. Secondly, these systems need to be also underpinned by the verification and certification bodies. So basically independent third-party entities that will be verifying that these emissions have been reduced, And of course, the digital monitoring and reporting systems help us facilitate this process. So this is, in a nutshell, what we define carbon market infrastructure and also the key components. Now, why do we need this carbon market infrastructure in the first place? And why countries need to set up and adopt these systems to participate in carbon markets? The first entry point to this question is that Paris Agreement, as you know, the international treaty, outlines in a number of provisions in Article 4, 6, 9, and 13, different accounting and reporting and tracking requirements for countries to fulfill. And as we see, it's a very fast evolving space, which keeps changing and also adding more responsibility to countries on setting up policy frameworks and infrastructure to fulfill these requirements, which include monitoring and develop national inventories, monitoring the emissions from all sectors and sources, having robust monitoring systems. Also, secondly, accounting, doing a very accurate and transparent accounting of the emissions, as Gadde was mentioning, the corresponding adjustments. It's an accounting mechanism recently added that requires robustness and transparency and avoiding double counting. And finally, the reporting. There are significant requirements on submitting regular reports on the emission data, as well as biennale report on greenhouse gas emissions, and also what are called the transparency reports every 5 years. So this is just to give you an overview of the underlying legal and regulatory framework on the infrastructure requirements for countries to put in place and the expectations on these commitments. So what are the current challenges that we see in the project level, at the national level, at the global level in terms of infrastructure? What are the limitations or constraints that we see that we need to put efforts on a streamlining and improving? At the project level, and I'm sure many of you may be familiar with all these challenges, we see difficulties in data collection and verification because we have projects that are complex in remote locations. We also may have limited financial resources and technical capacity, and the reporting requirements are complex with different standards and protocols and limited interoperability between the systems. We see similar challenges at country level on having data quality and reliability with some gaps, inaccuracies, because as we know, some of the conventional data collection processes are quite manual and costly. And we also see long-term constraints on resources. And finally, at the global level, infrastructure managed by institutions like UNFCCC are still evolving, and the requirements are still being defined. So it's sometimes difficult to navigate through the evolving configuration and lack of harmonized protocols. So these are the challenges, and how we can overcome these challenges, and what is the role of digital systems and infrastructure. So basically here, through digital innovation, we can overcome these challenges because all these systems, and we will provide more examples in the following slides and also in the upcoming sessions, gives us ways to enhance the efficiency, and because we are automating processes that were manual and now they can be fully automated with programming and with APIs and with the smart contracts, so we can have more automation and efficiency. This digitalization also gives us more transparency and traceability, because data that was before in a manual format or in an electronic format without communicating or exchanging information is now disclosed and open up and easy to manage, and therefore traceable and more visible to relevant stakeholders. It gives us more accessibility, but at the same time security with multi-factor authentication, privacy compliance, and also the option to customize the accessibility of users and stakeholders to access the data. And finally, also it gives us more room for standardization. The more we have similar systems that are communicating to each other with similar data formats, the better we're harmonizing and standardizing this ecosystem, And of course, last but not least, we have this real-time nature. Instead of having different periods of time, we have real-time monitoring and collection of data, which is a game changer, especially when we talk about a large volume of data in multiple countries and in a region. So these are the main benefits of digitization and how they can achieve the solving these challenges that we see now. So now that we have gone through the overview of what is carbon market infrastructure, what is the underlying policy framework or legal framework, and what are the key challenges and potential benefits that digitalization and these platforms offer, let's go back to the key components of carbon market infrastructure and deep dive in two very important components. One is the monitoring, reporting, and verification system, and the other one is the registry system. But I will start with the one that you see highlighted in the slide. Again, as a refresher, monitoring, reporting, and verification systems is a key tool to track the greenhouse gas emission reductions. Under the Paris Agreement, as we have said some of the colleagues before, these systems are fundamental and countries are required by the articles that I was referring before to measure and report these emissions, as well as their nationally determined contributions. And these systems are already widely in use at different levels, and we're not going to address today the different levels, but we're going to address in the upcoming sessions that we have different MRVs at different levels and different scopes, project, national, regional level, and of course, covering different scopes. But basically, for the application of these MRV systems, the use of digital technologies to improve is fundamental, and we will show some examples in a couple of slides. Before we move to examples and key benefits, we're going to play a short video to give this overview of the MRV system. So bear with me on going to this video. And can you see the video right now?
Not, I see the screen, not the video.
Okay, 1 second. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Great. So I will play it out. Abby, let me know if there's any audio issue, but I will start playing it. And then it's going to be just providing an overview of the MRV, and we will get back to the presentation in a second.
Sounds good. I don't hear the audio, Gemma.
All right, let me do the last try. We give it the last try.
Sure.
All right, I'm going to play it now.
Globally, the carbon marketplace continues to mature, offering a wide array of programs and markets to deliver, buy, and sell emission reduction credits, ERCs, or carbon credits. But the results have been mixed. How can buyers know that the emission reduction credits they purchase are real? Well, it requires careful measurement, reporting, and verification, MRV, to ensure results are real before payments are made, and to prove an activity has actually avoided or removed harmful greenhouse gas emissions, so that actions can be converted into credits with monetary value. Let's break that down. MRV refers to the multi-step process. First, to measure the amount of emissions reduced by a specific mitigation activity over a period of time. Then report these findings to an accredited third party, who then verifies the report so that results can be certified and emission reduction credits can be issued. Let's look at an example. The World Bank's Climate Change Fund Management Unit has developed standards for measuring emissions reductions from projects ranging from forest preservation and sustainable land use to clean energy and fiscal and financial solutions. Once a project or program activities are underway, data is collected. This could be reading electricity meters on home solar power units, gathering information on subsidies accessed by businesses, or surveying changes in tree cover. This data is then processed to calculate emissions reductions, and the results are verified by a third party. Once verified, the credits are issued, so buyers can pay the country for the proven results. Now, digital technologies can streamline data collection, processing, and quality control in MRV processes, helping to reduce the cost and time to ERC issuance. Innovations in MRV can help expand climate action worldwide and unleash the potential of climate finance and the carbon marketplace to combat climate change.
All right. So I'm going to now go back to the slides. There we go. And then we're going to move forward with the MRV. I think this video, the 2-minute video link is in the bottom of this chat, but we will also, it will be included in the slides that we're showing now. And it gives a very good overview of the MRV in addition to the main definitions. So moving forward, and let me know if you cannot see my slides. Digital MRV systems, we have seen in the past that, and current as well systems, conventional MRV systems, that project data is often recorded manually and stored as a hard copy or in an Excel worksheet. And this is a reality. It happens, and it's a current practice, and it's both difficult to analyze for reporting purposes, but also it's quite costly to verify, and it takes lengthy timeframes to reach the results. So digital MRV systems are these emerging models where the aim is to leverage as many digital technologies as possible, being interconnected, streamlining, and enhancing the efficiency, such as smart meters, remote sensors, even satellite data, to digitally report, record, and analyze project information. This increases report accuracy. It reduces the time required for the data collection, which it takes more than a year, and we can reduce it by half time. And also it lowers the cost of a third-party verification of the project's performance. On the right side, you see a quick snapshot on the different components that are challenging or still room for improvement in the conventional MRVs. And then on the right side, in the green checks, you see how the digital MRV is providing this value addition, such as real-time data collection and aggregation of large volumes of data, especially enhancing this scale-up and sustainability opportunities, automating the data analysis, providing rich insights for performance planning, but also on the carbon finance. It can monitor real-time flagging of outliers and noise and erroneous data. And it also enables a more standardized, systematic way of reporting instead of having different reports, different templates, different taxonomies. And finally, a one-off MRV verification. And that's one of the most innovative approaches right now to try to automate fully or semi-automate the process of monitoring, reporting, and verification to the extent possible, so it can enhance efficiency and scale up in multiple countries. To give you two examples, what does this mean when we add the digital technologies and we upgrade this conventional MRV? In the example of, for instance, sample renewable energy mitigation action, the electricity in the monitoring, the electricity generation data is digitally reported via smart meters to the project database, and then readings from different meters can be checked against one another to ensure the data is being recorded. So that's on the monitoring phase through the smart meters. When we reach the reporting phase, these parameters required by the methodology of that specific project, such as the grid emission factor, is digitally updated and linked to the system, automatically generating the report with a standardized format. And finally, in the verification stage, before we issue the asset, the verifier can access directly this database remotely and verify the reported data. So the digital MRV system can be verified separately and fast track this process. And the same thing we see for the sample of energy efficiency mitigation action. In this case, for example, in the monitoring stage, the sale and the use of efficient household technologies can be tracked digitally to monitor the number in operation and performance of each unit. When it's time to report, the database is programmed automatically to aggregate this continuously monitored performance data. And finally, at the verification stage, the verifier can access this database remotely to do fast tracking of this process. So it's promising, and it's already a model being implemented to fast track and enhance the efficiency of the data being collected, reported, and verified. Now, how this is relevant to ASCENT, and here we provided a very quick overview, high-level slide of ASCENT digital MRV flow at a glance. As you can see from left to right, we have here on the energy access side 2 steps, and the digital MRV system will help us to collect data from multiple energy projects and combine all these data sources and all this rich data. Then we move to step number 2, data aggregation, very important step. And as Wendy was mentioning in her opening remarks, the major force for having all these volumes of data aggregated and providing all this richness of insights, which then we can assess the performance. And then once we have completed this step 1 and number 2, we bridge it to carbon finance. And with this data, performance data, we can proceed to prepare carbon projects, validate them, and verify the emission reductions out of these projects, which then will lead us to step number 4, to issue these carbon assets and transact them to the market and monetize these emission reductions that we have measured through the data collection and aggregation. So this is the vision that we have all together, and the work plan is to go through and work on the architecture and the data flow, the data stream of all these steps. And basically, this slide, I'm not going to go through it today. It's very granular, but this is just a preview of the design of the back end of this digital MRV, and we will be presenting all this process in I4C in a couple of weeks in the ASCENT Day, and we will elaborate more on the full data stream of this digital MRV. So remember this slide, as we will get back to you on the next session, getting into more details. So last but not least, after we discuss the MRV system, I will wrap up with another important component of carbon market infrastructure, which is the carbon registry and the trading platform. And this is, of course, a fundamental component, because once we have verified the emission reductions, it's now time to issue the carbon asset that we can then sell into the market and monetize these emission reductions. What is the carbon registry? It is basically a database that helps us track and record carbon credits. And it also facilitates, in some cases, the trading activities. So there's a transaction functionality where the user, the administrator of the registry, can sell the credits, also put them in a dashboard to make them visible to investors and to potential buyers, and then create a marketplace where the country can issue the credits in the registry, and through the functionality sell them to the buyer. This is, again, part of the Paris Agreement and Article 6.2, which encourages countries to cooperate and sell and buy credits. So with this, I will wrap up. We will give you more details in the next session. And thank you very much for your attention. And of course, any questions, feel free to ask, but over to Abby for the next and last part.
Thanks a lot, Gemma. And like I mentioned, there's a lot to absorb here, but this is just one of the many conversations to be had on this topic. We welcome any feedback, questions that you may have. I'll drop in an email address that you can use to reach out to us with any questions / feedback, but let's come to that later. Moving from all the concepts that you heard to actual implementation of projects under the program, I will invite Martina Bosi, who is our Senior Climate Change and Energy Specialist and leads the bank's efforts to integrate carbon monetization into our regional operations. Martina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Avi, and thank you everyone for joining this first installment of the ASCENT Capacity Building Program on Carbon. It's been a lot of material, And do not worry, we will have opportunity to have more bite sizes and really opportunities for you to engage as well, so we can also hear your perspective and your experiences. So this is meant to be a broad overview. There'll be opportunities to delve a little bit more into it. So I just have a couple of concluding remarks. I don't know who is controlling the screen, but if you can go to the next slide. And so you've seen had a lot of material and a lot of explanation on the methodologies, the policies, the MRV, the monitoring, reporting, verification, and the transaction registries. And that's all important, but also important to keep our eyes on the prize of what we're trying to do. Of course, we're trying to provide energy access, as Wendy mentioned at the beginning, and all this that we're doing is to mobilize additional financing that can be generated from the climate benefits associated with the clean energy access, and that can help accelerate that goal of SDG 7. And so here we have an initial estimate. Don't put your money on this yet, on the total of 290 megatons, but it's a significant amount of emission reduction. It may change as we go through. Things always do when we implement programs. But if you multiply by some price estimate of carbon, whether it's $5 or $10, it gives you a sense of what is the potential revenue stream that could come if we manage to generate the emission reduction from the ASCENT supported investment to the market. Next slide. This is just a slide to show you. We will go into it. We are developing together with ASCENT clients and the ASCENT countries and the stakeholders a very nice project that we think is going to have features that are attractive for carbon monetization. And so in the interest of time, I will go really quickly. And so it has to do with the fact that it's about development. It's about co-benefits, and that's important to the market. We're also leveraging innovation and technological know-how in energy access. These digital platforms are really important for ensuring transparency and credibility. And so in our minds, very much worth it. The ASCENT program allows us to have a regional approach and regional platform to aggregate, and size matters. And so this will help us to reach the size so we can attract the attention of the market as well, even for the smaller countries who have found it traditionally very difficult to access. And also, we've heard from our in the market segment from Navid that providing the bank can help provide this sense of more credibility and more confidence as we will follow all the World Bank operational policies and procedures. And so this will help in the environment and social work, the procurement, financial management, and ensure that things are done in a standard that the market values, as we just heard. Next slide. But there's no free lunch, right? This will not come on its own. And we have been working with our colleagues of COMESA. We will be engaging with you, individual countries, on in each of the countries too, to be able to generate and get the carbon and get it to market. And so here is just an overview of the work program we are setting up in terms of enhancing readiness, in terms of the mobilization of finance, and the very important capacity building. I think several of the speakers spoke of this. This is not something an international organization or can do on its own. It also needs a bottom-up capacity and an enabling environment. And we're very, very keen to work with you, deploy the experience that Hanya mentioned that we have in capacity buildings and carbon market, and making sure that we have this as a successful program. Next slide. So what's next is we very much look forward to seeing many of you in person at the ASCENT Carbon Day in Berlin. We have invited focal points on climate from each country, ASCENT countries, digital focal points from each countries. COMESA, of course, is the key player for this and a partner in this day. Along with us, the World Bank, you'll have the climate colleagues as well as the energy colleagues.
And we will go more into deep dives into some of the key areas. But importantly, we'd like this day to also be a forum for exchanges, a network to get know each other better, and also understand for us to listen to all of you about what are the priorities, what are the experiences, what are the needs that are there. And so we very much look forward to that day and meeting you in person there for those who can make it. But again, this is not the end of the day either. This is a program that we will be rolling out throughout the life of the ASCENT program. Next slide. And so I just want to stop with some just key messages takeaways that one might get from this session and where we're going. And so one, of course, what we're under ASCENT Carbon, what we aim to do is mobilize additional non-debt financing to help accelerate the critical energy access goals that you all have. And we believe that ASCENT has the potential to access carbon finance opportunities. As I said, over the life, it could be up to 2.9 billion tons of CO2, 295 million tons of CO2 that leads to $2.9 billion if the price is $10. There are a lot of uncertainties there, but it is a sizable prize that we're looking at if we get things right. Of course, this generating and monetizing carbon takes effort. COMESA plays an important role and is there to help and work with each individual countries. The digital platforms are key to provide a valuable foundation and support. And we will be supporting each one of the ASCENT countries on this. And there's the list there. We are integrating at the bank carbon finance support in the ASCENT program. Again, both at the regional level, we have the privilege of working together with COMESA, but also increasingly at the individual country levels, so the individual countries can connect and also build the capacity to work with your own environment. I look very much forward to meeting you in I4C and then the ASCENT Carbon Day, which is not part of the I4C program. It's really something that the World Bank, together with COMESA, is taking the opportunity to organize to have our first face-to-face meeting on ASCENT Carbon. And we will be happy to see you there. Let us know if you have particular questions or issues you want to discuss, either there or in the next webinars. Abi, over to you.
Thanks very much, Martina, for making time. With that, we have come to the end of our webinar, but like Martina said, we would like to continue the conversation. I have shared the email address in chat where you can reach out to us if you have any questions, feedback. Like we said, this is one of the many conversations on this topic, and our teams, both at COMESA and World Bank, will continue to be available even after this session in case you have a follow-up. We would love to hear your feedback on this webinar, things that you liked, things that you missed, things that you would love to learn more about, and we would be happy to put something together along what you would need, what your demands are. We'll share a brief survey and we'll appreciate if you could spare a few minutes to respond after this webinar, after today. So hopefully you'll receive it in your inboxes soon. So we would appreciate your response. Thanks again to all our speakers. I see Navid is still connected. I really appreciate Navid for sitting through the glitches and through this 2-hour period. Hari, Gemma, Martina, thanks a lot. Joshua, did you want to come in?
There are some questions in the Q&A, so I don't know whether you have time to take them.
We can spare a couple of minutes if people are still connected to take a couple of questions. I can read out the questions if that's okay. Overall, the presentations will be made available and the recording will be also made available on the COMESA website as we have been doing. So just why don't we take a couple of questions since colleagues have put in the effort to put those in the chat box, and then we'll call it close. The first question is from Clement Siam, sorry. The Africa region, the question is, the Africa region has a lot of assets that could contribute to carbon markets, thereby increase the sustainability of the energy, but the legal framework, regulation capacity, and technology to measure are not adequate. Why is there little effort being taken to address this challenge? And if I can read both questions together and then we can address perhaps jointly. The second question is for Naveed. Great intervention, Naveed. I wonder whether establishing an additional carbon tax to companies in developing countries in sub-Saharan Africa, the best measure to mobilize private sector finance, especially for projects with co-benefits. Countries will be impacted by international policies like CBAM, and in the case of countries like Mozambique, with more than 70% aluminium exported to EU, additional tax burden would negatively impact the local economy. Would be glad to hear your thoughts on this. These are the two questions that I have. Since the last one addressed specifically to Naveed, maybe we can start there, and then I'll invite Martina or Hari to talk about the enabling environment side. Naveed, please.
Yes, absolutely, Sana. It's a very good question. And so just the way the CBAM is going to work is that if you have not paid or in your own country a certain a carbon tax or a certain amount of applied a certain amount of carbon credit, maybe government issued, then you have to pay the bill at the border in EU. So let's say if I am the aluminium exporter and I am the government, and I would like to protect the industry which is exporting out of Mozambique to EU, the aluminium. So I would put in measures that will actually create a local pool of these carbon credits and a local pool of the tax rather than paying the whole amount to CBAM. So if the 1 ton of CO2 you have to pay at the border of the EU is, let's say, 70 euro, and in your own country the carbon tax or the carbon pool that you generate with the government and the industry is around, let's say, 30 or 50 euros, then your tax burden that you have to pay to EU will reduce from 70 minus 50 to 20 euros only. So you would rather have most likely have the carbon tax which goes towards giving maybe renewable investments for the industry so that the industry becomes green anyway, so that it reduces the carbon emission in overall mix, so you do not even have the 1 ton of emission. So the idea usually is either by the carbon credit or by tax, you collect from the local industry, you invest it back into the industry, so the emissions goes down, and you do not send this precious money into the paying the tax at the border in the EU. So this is how you can use the taxes and registries and local carbon credits to protect the exporting countries.
Thank you, Naveed. Martina or Hari, do you want to come in on the enabling efforts to enhance the enabling environment in Africa? Martina, please.
Yeah, sure. I'll start and maybe Hari can complement. I think it's a very good point that is raised here in this comment. And it's one that we've seen all around, because putting in place this enabling environment to measure the carbon and be able to access carbon markets, as we said, takes effort, takes resources, and there's a big competition for these resources. So countries want to know, is this worth it? Is there really an outlet at the end? Will I get a benefit out of this? And I think this is exactly what we're trying to do in the ASCENT program by aggregating all of the countries. We have the opportunity to have a more standardized approach. So hopefully that also lowers the cost and also is more visible to the market and helps us generate the quality and the transparency, and thereby build confidence that there is an outlet and that this effort is worth it. And so, but you're right, these are gaps, and these are some of the gaps that we are definitely in our work program planning to work towards addressing in the ASCENT countries with the ASCENT program. Hari, I don't know if you want to complement, but I hope that helps. But very good point.
Yeah, not much, Martina. Thanks. So I also actually responded in the charter to this question. So yeah, on top of what Martina mentioned, of course, there are initiatives already ongoing to provide such kind of a support. And as I mentioned, so they're all not well coordinated, and the efforts are not focused at the moment. So of course, one of the things that, as Martina mentioned, through our ASCENT program is to bring some coherence and minimize the efforts that the country is required to participate in these things through different like regional approaches and etc. But yes, this is actually a major issue at the global level, and there are ongoing efforts, of course, to address. But of course, at the same time, we also want to see more countries to be proactive and then reach out to that kind of a thing. So it should be a two-way effort, I would say. Thanks.
Thank you, Hari. With that, we have obviously run out of time, but also run out of questions. So, but we'll, like I said, we will continue the conversation and look forward to staying in touch with all of you. Thanks again to the speakers and all those who took times to join today. Thanks a lot. Take care.